Good afternoon and welcome to the Rotary Club of Kerrville. I'd like to welcome everybody here this afternoon and also ask everybody to check in on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you use. Let everybody know where we're at. We're solving all the problems of Kerrville and Kerr County, Texas, right here today. Not really. At this time, I'd like to ask David Reese if he would please come up and lead us in our invocation and prayer pledge, please.
Jeff, please play with me. No, pray with me. Yeah. Heavenly Father, we humbly thank you for your abundant favor and grace today. We ask your blessings over this gathering of friends and colleagues. Father, we pray that you will protect our first responders, particularly our firefighters at this time of year. I know that several of them rolled past my home with a brush fire that sprang up in our neighborhood over the weekend, and they've been fighting all over the county and other parts of the state to quell the outbreak of fires in our area. We would also ask for your blessing over our members of our military service. Father, and we would ask you to bless those that are less fortunate than we are. We ask your blessing on this meal and the hands prepared it, that we may be further in your service. And we ask all this in your Son's holy name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to make one modification to this is for our river talk we're having today. So instead of big wheels keep on turning, if you would sing Kerrville has a river, okay? So, and I wanted to see if a couple of weeks ago, I asked if anybody could read music, and there's only about 4 people who do, but I want to see if you got rhythm today. So we're going to clap. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. If you go down to the river, that you're gonna find lots of people down there. It's a great place to spend some time. People on the river are happy as clams. Kerrville's got a river. Proud Mary keeps on burning. There you go. Going on the river. One more time. Rolling on the river. Hey, good job. All right.
Oh. Thank you, George, for another song. You always never cease to amaze us, sir. This time I'd like to ask Clint Morris to come up and please introduce our guest speaker for the day.
Thank you very much, President Jeff. Our speaker today grew up in upstate New York with a degree and she got a degree in natural resources from Cornell. She is now the natural resource manager for the Upper Guadalupe River Authority and has become pretty much the face of the UGRA in our community through her numerous newspaper articles and speaking presentations, as well as serving on various water boards forecasting our need for water in the Kerrville area. You may ask, how did she get here? Well, her husband, who was born in South Dakota, is a fishing biologist with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, and he got a job in Mountain Home. They have 2 children, both Texans, which they refer to as their anchor babies. She is going to speak to us today on working together to protect our river. So please give a warm Rotary welcome to our speaker, Tara Bushnoe.
Thank you very much. That was a very colorful introduction. I appreciate that. And I've known Mr. Morse for years. He's been a volunteer with our summer volunteer water sampling program and collects a sample up on the North Fork every summer. So I think, do you remember what we had to do? I don't remember. Oh, you have the mouse. Okay. So I just wanted to talk today about a little bit about our water resources and about some different ways that we can be engaged in stewardship and preserving the health of the Guadalupe River. You know, when we learn about where our water comes from and how we're using it, and can help us kind of envision better the role that we can play to help, you know, safeguard this amazing natural resource that we have in our community, the Guadalupe River. And so I start a little bit with let's see, get the mouse working. Just start with a little bit of information about the Upper Guadalupe River Authority. We're a conservation and reclamation district, and we were created in 1939 by the Texas legislature. And our jurisdiction is just Kerr County, and we are funded by Kerr County property tax dollars, and also led by a 9-member board of directors. And our role in Kerr County is really as a steward of our water resources. River authorities throughout Texas have different functions. You know, some are utilities of water, wastewater, or energy. And our role is really to help to represent the needs of Kerr County in different water planning processes at the regional or state level, to have programs to help enhance our local water resources. And we maintain water quality monitoring programs throughout the county, as well as outreach and education programs as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our main sources of water, about surface water and groundwater primarily, and then what are our current conditions of our water resources, as well as some ideas about how we can be engaged in stewardship. So just start with our surface water resources. So surface water is grouped into 15 main river basins in Texas. Those are what those puzzle pieces are, all of our different areas of Texas that drain or contribute to our main rivers. And we're right there in the center in that orange river basin, which is the Guadalupe River Basin. So just kind of zoom in on that area a bit more. We have a very privileged position, I think, at the headwaters of the Guadalupe River in Kerr County. Kerr County circled there in red. And the shaded light brown area is all of the land that is connected to the Guadalupe River. So this is where all of our tributaries come from, that when it rains, the water that travels through the land or across the watershed and drains towards the river. So the Guadalupe River starts in western Kerr County and then wiggles its way about 400 miles across south central Texas. It joins the San Antonio River about 10 miles before they both empty into San Antonio Bay and then into the Gulf of Mexico. So if we zoom in just on Kerr County, the brown shaded area of Kerr County is our Guadalupe River Basin. And we can define the areas of land into different river basins based on the concept of a watershed. So a watershed is all the area of land that drains to a certain body of water. And any watershed is outlined by your high points in elevation. And so that dictates how gravity is going to carry rainfall towards that body of water. So this black outline here, can you see that? I think probably not. That black, yes, outline is that high point in elevation that kind of delineates the watershed. So the rain falls on one side of the hill, then water is going to drain towards that river over here. And if it falls on the other side of the hill, then water is going to drain towards that stream. So kind of knowing where your watersheds are and what activities are taking place on the land and how they can impact to the river is a great first step too. So when we have our main river basin in Kerr County for the Guadalupe River Basin, we can even divide it down further into our individual watersheds. And we have some main creeks that contribute to the Guadalupe River. Johnson Creek, the North Fork and the South Fork, those three main watersheds bring the majority of flow into the river that we see in Kerrville. And then from there, all of our smaller creeks and tributaries also contribute to the river. So we can think about, you know, what watershed do we live in? What watershed do we work in? And that kind of helps you connect a bit how your activities and your area of the county that you interact in, you know, what kind of water body you have the closest relationship to. So that on the groundwater side, we have 9 main aquifers in Texas, and the aquifers are the water holding portion of our geologic formations of rock. And this map shows the water bearing layers that are on the surface primarily. So that arrow is indicating about where we are. Western part of Kerr County on the surface is that light green, the Edwards Trinity Plateau Aquifer. And then the dark green is the Trinity Aquifer. So the Edwards kind of erodes off as we go from west to east, and the Trinity's on the surface. I just wanted to point out the blue, I'm not sure how well you can see the contrast, but this blue area here is the Balcones portion of the Edwards. And, you know, that land was offset millions of years ago by a big geologic event that created the Balcones fault. So when you're watching the San Antonio news, for example, and they're talking about the water level of the Edwards Aquifer in San Antonio, it's really how it's fluctuating in that blue area, not where we live in Kerr County. So they are separate, they function differently, and water level changes differently. So our wells in Kerr County are not in the aquifer that we hear levels reported on the San Antonio news. And this is what, you know, aquifers looks like. These are cores from a well, and it's interesting to look at and see how, you know, those dense rock formations have all tiny little holes, tiny little spaces in them where water is stored. And when you drill a well, then the water seeps in from the walls around. So even though it's solid rock, it holds water. And then your springs are that interface between groundwater and surface water. There are openings in the rock where groundwater starts leaking out and continually flowing across the surface. And that's how all of our rivers are formed in Kerr County. And springs are the lifeblood of the Guadalupe River. Over 90% of the flow in Kerrville really comes from those headwater springs along the North Fork and the South Fork and Johnson Creek. So in this is a picture of the headwater springs along the North Fork, and that white rock on the top is the Edwards Formation. And then the bed of the stream there is the top of the Trinity. So we say rain would fall in Western Kerr County, and then it kind of flows laterally through that Edwards Aquifer and then comes out in an area where the river has cut down through, and the Trinity is at the surface. So in the interface between those two layers is where our springs are coming out. And then of course, you know, in eastern parts of Kerr County where we just have the Trinity Aquifer at the surface, there are some springs as well. So numerous springs all throughout Kerr County that contribute to the flow of the river. And that's really the same story of all of our hill country rivers. How they're formed is by spring flows in those headwaters areas. So if you live in Kerrville, or you get your water from the city of Kerrville, you turn on the faucet here at the Kroc Center, what you're getting is a combination of surface water, groundwater, and then aquifer storage and recovery water, which is an excellent resource technology that the city of Kerrville takes advantage of. So they pump excess water out of the Guadalupe River during times of year when it's flowing more, and treat it to drinking water standards, and then inject it into an aquifer storage and recovery well where it can be stored and then used for later use. So I saw recently, I think they estimate have about 1 billion gallons of stored water in those ASR wells. So having those 3 different sources, surface water, groundwater, ASR, really creates a great management strategy and resiliency and supply. And then also reuse water is another source. So after a wastewater treatment plant finishes treating water that's come from our homes, then it can be released back into streams, or it can be stored for future use for irrigation water for athletic fields or for golf courses. And the city's also taken has also, you know, increased the amount of reuse water they can store recently through the construction of the pond over off of Spur 100. And then rainwater harvesting is that final source that just wanted to mention that we also have in our area. Increasing number of people are taking advantage of rainwater harvesting. And there's so many you can have a collection system that ranges just from a 50-gallon barrel like this that you use to water some potted plants on your patio to like a whole house system. And Mr. Morse asked me to talk a bit more about rainwater harvesting, so I'm going to come back to it in a second. So more on that in a minute. And the amount of these different water resources and the quantity, is obviously important to fulfilling our needs, to keeping a healthy ecosystem in the Guadalupe River. So how are we currently doing on that? Well, rain, I didn't add in the 1/10 of an inch of rain that we got last night into this graph, but I wouldn't have changed the story too much, unfortunately. So that red bar is January 1st to, I think this data goes up through the 21st of March. So through last week, 1.45 inches of rain. The blue bar is the long-term average, or over the last 30 years at this gauging station at the USDA's weather station at their facility just north of I-10 has on average from January 1st through the end of March measured about 4 3/4 inches of rain. And then the green is what we had at this point last year. And I always put the yellow in there, which is the 2011, which is our most recent strong extreme drought that we had in our area. So unfortunately, we're even below to date that 2011 number. And river flow reflects that as well. So US Geological Survey has gauging stations throughout the country. There's 5 main ones in Kerr County that UGRA and the city of Kerrville support. That blue, what color is it, green or blue? The line across the bottom shows how the flow has changed over the last week. So we see a slight little bump on the 30th, which would be from the rain last night. But the triangles are what the long-term average has been. So we are consistently, below normal on river flow. It's about 20, 25, 27 cubic feet per second today, and normal for this time of year would be closer to 100. So the US Drought Monitor is a compilation report that's released every Thursday that takes in rainfall, soil moisture conditions, and it shows pretty much the entire Western United States is in some level of drought. So the intensity of drought increases from yellow to maroon. And if we zoom in just on Texas, this is what our map looks like from this week. So Kerr County is right there in the middle of Texas, right here. And you can see the eastern part of the county is more red, which would be the extreme drought category, and then ranging just slightly better to severe. And it's really intensified a lot in the last few weeks because we haven't had our spring rain. So these just show the maps from February 15th to this week, and you can kind of see how the intensity in that red is increasing each week. The NOAA Climate Prediction Center creates predictions for seasonal predictions, and they're showing that drought is going to persist, through the beginning of summer, through June 30th. So our programs and activities at UGRA reflect a focus on the health of the river, under all conditions, not just during drought years. And we achieve that through our routine water quality monitoring programs. And by analyzing that water quality data, we get information about, what are our threats, what are our most common pollution types. And then a lot of our programs also focus on stewardship. So there's always ways that individuals can contribute to the health of the river. After all, over 95% of Texas is privately owned. So a private landowner, whether you have a 1,000-acre ranch or a residential lot, there's always things that we can do that are positive to protect the river and to keep it healthy. And choices that you make in landscaping are a great opportunity for that. About 30 to 60% of household water use is in landscaping. And some of the different choices that you could make would be possibly to reduce lawn size. So in that picture on the top, I think a lot of people love to have a lush green lawn that you can dig your toes into, have an area to have a picnic. And I think you should have that. Maybe it can be a smaller area instead of your whole lawn. And then in the other places, you could use techniques like hardscapes or native plants to fill in that landscaping. Using mulch and efficient uses of irrigation like drip irrigation really help to maximize the amount of water that you're using, watering more slowly and deeply. And then if you do have slopes, really being extra careful on those that your water isn't running off. And in years like this, it might also be refining objectives. So if you had planned to do a landscape overhaul this spring and invest in a lot of plants and then have a large area that you needed to irrigate and get going, this might not be the best year to do that because doesn't seem like we're going to get much help from the rain. Rain gardens are also a technique that can help to prevent runoff. So they can be a component of your landscaping. If you have an area of your property, for example, that tends to get really wet when it rains, that all of your drainage collects in. These are depressions that can be dug out and then layered with stone, different size stone layers, and then some compost and mulch, and planted with kinds of plants that can stand to be completely wet during times when it is raining, but then also will dry out totally after that water has drained out of the basin, and will do just fine in drier conditions. So always look at that as a technique to help keep water on your property. When it rains, we just don't want the water to come down the gutter, go out onto the driveway, out down to the curb, into the storm drain cistern and be gone. You know, especially now, this is precious. We want to try to have our properties hold on to as much rain as we can. And a lot of these techniques are demonstrated in UGRA's educational landscape. We call it our Eduscape. It surrounds our building at 125 Lehman Drive. We designed it in collaboration with the Texas Master Gardeners several years ago. And it demonstrates about 15 different concepts that show water conservation as well as stormwater detention. So we want to trying to hold on to that rain and keeping it from washing off. So invite you to stop by for a self-guided tour. We have 10 interpretive signs that surround the building. And there's also some tours set up through Riverside Nature Center. Okay, so rainwater harvesting is one of those practices that can really be scaled for any project budget and for you know, any type of property. It could be, like I said, from this 50-gallon barrel up to a whole house system. And those additional sources of water that you're using to supplement maybe groundwater, surface water, takes pressure off of those other resources. But also the second benefit that rainwater harvesting supplies is that when water comes off your roof, it's not going into your gutter and then down in the driveway and out to the curb to the storm drain system. You're holding on to it. And so you're capturing that runoff and holding it back for a beneficial use, because when it rains, water that doesn't soak in, you know, washes across the landscape and can pick up pollutants along the way and then carry them. Gravity carries them to the low points, which are creeks and our rivers. This is our 30,000 gallon rainwater catchment system at UGRA that captures rainwater from about 10,000 square feet, about half the surface of our roof, and we use it for landscape irrigation. And you know, you go online and you can find so many different examples of rainwater harvesting, all different types of materials that tanks can be made out of. Plastic tanks are generally a bit cheaper than metal tanks. So the main components of your rainwater catchment system are first your roof. You know, how are you going to collect that water? Generally, you'd have a screen before that water enters your gutter that would screen out leaves or insects so that they're not going down into your tank. Well, without my laser pointer, I'm a little, here we go. And then after the water's in your tank, you have water levels so you can track a water level gauge, so you can track how much water is in your tank. And then a large tank like this would have a pump. If you're using it in your house, then the water would go through a filtration system. Always want to have a backflow preventer on the line that distributes the water, especially if you're also using a potable water source in your house, because those sources should not be able to mix at all. Some other examples of tank. This plastic one on the left is about a 2,500 gallon tank that would cost about $1,200 to $2,000. Galvanized tanks are more expensive. This is a 300 gallon galvanized tank that was about $1,200. And then a whole house system, like the one on the left, is a 20,000 gallon galvanized tank that supplies that. It's a small home, just one person lives there, but they are good on water. Even going into a drought like this, their tank is almost full, and just small amounts of dew or small amounts of precipitation are keeping that water level up. And then the example on the right are, instead of having one large tank, there's 4 small tanks. Those are each about 2,500 gallons. And together it has 10,000 gallons of storage by having the capacity broken up into those 4 different tanks. So some considerations when you're planning a rainwater catchment system, you want to think first about what are you going to use that water for? If you're just going to be using it on your landscape irrigation, then you don't need a full filtration and sterilization system. But if you're going to use it for your whole house, then you would want to have those components. Your catchment area, your roof, the amount of rain that your roof can collect is its footprint, not its square footage. So you kind of get a bird's eye view of your roof to be able to measure how large that catchment area is. And a steeply pitched roof is going to catch less water than one with a less of a slope. Also, your gutter size, when it currently rains, your gutters overflow because they're undersized, then even if you do the calculations correct, you're not going to be capturing all of that water because some of it is overflowing your gutters. So projects often include an upsize of gutters as well. And then your tank location, water needs to get into the tank via gravity. So it needs to be a little bit lower than where your gutters are coming off. And the size, there's different calculations based on the rainfall that we get in our area. If you're going to use it for your whole house use, how many people you have in your house, and the average water use, that you can calculate what size of tank you would need in order to, once it's full, to have a sustainable amount of water. And then whether or not you needed a gravel pad or a concrete pad depends on the size of your tank too, and how many pounds per square inch that tank exerts when it's full of water. So the taller, skinnier tanks are going to have more concentrated higher pounds per square inch. So you might need a concrete tank, concrete pad. And then distribution, after you get the water in the tank, how are you going to get it, where you need to use it, whether it's to your garden or to your landscaping. Just wanted to say a little bit more about the potable sources, about how those are treated for drinking water use. Rainwater is naturally free of a lot of the minerals that we have in our well water, which is great. It makes crystal clear ice cubes, but you still need to do some filtration on it. So that initial screening out of leaves and larger debris, then your tank would go through, like for example, a friend, he has a 10 micron filter. It goes through first, and then a 5 micron filter, which are similar to the filters that you might have on your well to screen out iron, for example. This is a picture of that system. So that first filter takes out the largest particles, the second one even smaller, and then this part is the water then passes through an ultraviolet light, which sterilizes for bacteria and for viruses. And then it's at drinking water standards and can go on into the house. I often get questions about well, what are the regulations for capturing rainwater? I've heard in other states that you're not allowed. And I thought this was a great resource at energy.gov, kind of summarizes regulations for all of the states. So Texas is green, which means we're very favorable for rainwater harvesting. We actually have some worked into the state code that provides a sales tax exemption for rainwater harvesting equipment. And then also homeowners associations are not allowed to prohibit rainwater catchment systems. And then Colorado is often the example that people hear about, and they're white, which means very restricted in how homes can use rainwater, because you're only allowed to have 120 gallons of stored rainwater. So we're in good shape in Texas for rainwater catchment systems. I wanted to mention too, just another application that I find really creative and easy to apply in a lot of different ways you can do this are called wildlife waters or wildlife guzzlers. I mean, it's very simple passive design. You have a roof with a little gutter on it, maybe goes into a 50-gallon barrel, and then that connects with a hose to a small bowl with a float on it that will maintain the water level in there. And then now you have a water source for wildlife. So we see a lot of these out on ranches that don't have, a large stock tank or something to be able to provide water for their animals. So I just wanted to touch on really briefly in addition to conserving water and reducing runoff, one of the topics that we actively promote through our stewardship programs are for how to care for the areas along our rivers and streams, which are called our riparian areas. And in this, because we're doing the hybrid with Zoom, I couldn't put this in slideshow mode to show that animation, but the green area out On the edges is our uplands where we're trying to hold water on. And then that light blue area is where the river expands out into the floodplain when it floods. And then the orange is our riparian area. So we're trying to hold on to runoff, hold on to rain in the uplands, but then those riparian areas are kind of our last line of defense to keeping the river healthy. They provide numerous benefits of storing water and filtering water, preventing erosion by holding that riverbank in place. So if you are a streamside landowner, kind of understanding the role that that vegetation can play to keep the river healthy is a great choice to make. And we just kind of contrast two sides of the river here. You know, if you own riverfront property, you want to enjoy it. You want to be able to see it. You want to get down to it. But there is kind of a balanced approach that you can take. So the picture on the left side shows a completely, undisturbed riparian area. It's providing a lot of those benefits that we talked about: filtering runoff, holding the bank in place, leaking flow back into the river when it's not raining. But it doesn't create a lot of opportunity to get down there to enjoy the river if that was your waterfront property. And then, the other side of the bank, all of the natural vegetation except the cypress are removed. So now you could see that we might have erosion issues. We're not getting any of that filtering and a lot of those beneficial uses. And then if a flood came through, this side would be much more prone to damage than that natural slide. So a balanced approach is kind of to protect that riparian area and stabilize those riverbanks as much as you can, but still provide access. And people, people and their land use objectives have to be a part of the equation. So that could be achieved by having a small maintained area next to the river, maybe a targeted access point, a nice picnicking area. And then the rest of the waterfront is kind of natural to be able to provide all of those great functions to the river. So we're being able to access the river for recreation and still preserving that vegetation, and that will protect the river that we love for our use for in the future. So that's all I have put together for y'all, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Know until recently that our Waterloo River Authority is one of the very few single county rivers in the state of Texas.
Yes, there's the Bandera County River Authority and Groundwater District, which is a very unique entity because it's a combo river authority and groundwater district, that they're just one county, but most of the river authorities are more than one county. Yes, sir.
Is there any attempt or thought of UGRA, even groundwater conservation or groundwater conservation, to promote coordination of groundwater and surface water? You can't, my phone ringing out.
I hear where you're going. Groundwater and surface water are historically managed separately in Texas. And so
You're not going to protect rivers and spring flow unless you somehow have a coordination of groundwater law. This point, the legislature is not receptive to changing any property right. But until they do, we're going to serious problems.
yes, I mean, surface water rights are managed at the state level through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and then groundwaters through your regional groundwater conservation districts. So I agree, they're connected. One is important for the other, and they are currently managed separately in Texas. Yes, sir.
Well, Tara, when we moved here, built our house, we didn't know anything about rainwater catchment. So now, if you invested in a well and have a big 5,000-gallon tank, is there any advantage to put in a rainwater system at that point?
I think there still is, yes. Diversity is always what creates better resiliency for situations where you might have an issue with your well if you had another source that you were able to tap into. Now, maybe you might not want to invest into a 30,000-gallon system, for example, because that could cost similar to what drilling a well would, but having an additional 5,000 gallons of water storage that you're able to use in an emergency, I think is a great choice. or maybe that you can supplement, you can use that for irrigating landscape and then save your well for your household use. You gonna try it? When are you getting one?
We have a big deep well, and we have a pump that pumps out of the river for domestic,
Right.
which is told out.
Well, let's get you a rainwater system. I think you could do it. You could give, and you could promote that great stewardship practice to your neighbors too. Yes, sir. No. So the Headwaters Groundwater Conservation District permits commercial wells in the Trinity Aquifer. So those would be that are permitted for like municipal use or irrigation or a mining use. But a private well in the Trinity is just registered through Headwaters. There are annual pumping caps, I guess would be an easy way to say, on those commercial wells. For domestic wells, there aren't, but there's a limit on how big of a pump you can have on a domestic well in Kerr County. And I think it's like 17.2 gallons per minute. So there's not an annual amount you can pump, but it's limited somewhat in the size of pump. So Headwaters has monitoring wells. I can't remember how many they have altogether. So monthly, they go out to these monitoring wells and measure the water level, and they have this information posted on their website. And they use an average of 4 of those wells as an index measurement. And that's what they use to kind of gauge how, what the water level is. And I think they use that as a trigger for their different drought restrictions. So I looked at the average values through 2021, and they were okay. So groundwater is going to fluctuate a lot more slowly than surface water does. When you get into a drought, you often see that drop quickly in surface water, but it's more slowly in groundwater. But Headwaters website or giving them a call would be a great way to kind of find out where that information is if you want to learn more. Yes, Mr. Allen.
Now, so everyone wants to take care of the river. Could you speak a little bit to, do we have any pollution problem? This coming summer, lack of rainfall, swimmability.
So overall, we have very good water quality in the Upper Guadalupe River, and we don't have big industries. We don't have a lot of cities with wastewater discharges into the river. So those are all really good things. The one area where we do see pollution issues is sometimes during the summer, and especially after a really strong rain event that creates a lot of runoff, like a big slug of runoff from our streets and into the river, that we see elevated bacteria levels. So bacteria is our main way to evaluate like how good an area is for swimming. So when you're in a drought, you have less water. Any inputs you have for bacteria are going to concentrate because they're in a smaller volume of water. So we do tend to see exceedances in those bacteria levels during the summer. UGRA we collect a weekly bacteria sample at 21 swimming locations throughout Kerr County, usually on the Mondays from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and post that on our website. And it's just a snapshot in time. It's one piece of information from that one day when we were at that swimming hole, but it's kind of something to look at and use that in connection with your own observations. You don't want to swim in areas where water is stagnant. Where you see a lot of algae is often an indication that the water is not moving or that there's a higher concentration of nutrients. So those also don't present great swimming locations. So you can use water quality data kind of in combination with your observations to make a good choice. Yes, sir.
Got a question. I noticed on the river what appears to be giant salvinia or water hyacinth. Is that?
You've seen it in Kerr County? I haven't seen it in Kerr County.
Or we're in Flat Rock Park.
So there's a lot of lily pads.
Is that what that is?
So I would guess, I'll check with Travis that works with me because he's out collecting our water samples and he would have a more recent eyes-on assessment of that. But we do often see a lot of lily pads throughout the river, and that's kind of been an increasing issue because it's been so long since we've had a scouring flood. So the lily pads are a natural aquatic vegetation and they provide a lot of habitat for insects and for fish. And so they are a good part of the river ecosystem. But when you haven't had a flood come through in a really long time, all your sediments you're getting a thicker sediment layer at the bottom, and that's more area for those aquatic plants to root into. And then they just, expand. So they aren't harmful to the river, but they do create not the best recreation conditions. But I haven't seen that invasive giant salvinia. Yes, and I'd be happy. I know y'all have your business meeting to do also. I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions after the meeting. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Tara. It's always great to hear about our natural resources and the river here. A little bit of club business here real quick. Todd Odom,
Yes,
little Rotary Day of Service we had.
we had a good turnout. I'm telling you, on Saturday, that Blue Case Park, oh, it's nice. Oh, it looks so good. You would please stand up and participate on Saturday. Some people couldn't make it, but hey. He called me, said if the trash people ever go on strike. Since y'all on the list somewhere, 100%. A really good job with the fellowship, a lot of fun, everybody walking hard, running, they were so excited. Thank you so much. It was very successful. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Tio. Doug, you told me some numbers earlier and I think I took a nap. So Doug Wintery approached the club about doing a no-cost service project right here at the Croc Center every Wednesday after our meetings, and stuffing eggs for the children in Kerrville for the big Easter egg hunt.
25,000 eggs get stuffed, and as of last week, the club has been credited with 3,000 of those.
Awesome. So 25,000 eggs, and the club has been credited with 3,000, and Woody has another little bit of tidbit for that too, I believe. So we need another 7,000 eggs stuffed, and talking to Doug and Sue before the meeting as well, they're going to continue to do that. So if you have a few minutes after the meetings, please right across the hallway, join us in some 7,000 egg stuffings. So.
Jeff's got it.
So, Veterans Breakfast coming up on the 15th of April. 8 o'clock to 9:30 at the Veterans Center, 411 Meadowview. Please invite a friend, invite a vet, invite a Rotarian, bring a friend. Come out and have a little celebration of our vets. We do it twice a year, and it's always fun to go in there and see our local heroes and get to talk to them. First Responders Golf Tournament's coming along well. We, April the 25th, Monday, 11 o'clock, River Hill Country Club. Be there, be a Rotarian spoke. And please come out and support, join us, have fun with it. It all goes back to our first responders here that take care of us, as was mentioned earlier too, when David Reese was given his invocation. Helps out the firefighters, EMS, police, DPS, whoever, the ones that are right here with us that are taking care of us on a daily basis. That's what this money goes to. 2 days after the golf tournament, we're going to have our first responders luncheon. It's going to be down in the gym. Unfortunately, they are not able to make the whipped cream for us to get pied this year. So Jeff, I'm sure you're happy about that. You can bring one.
The last act.
But please join us for that. That is a phenomenal lunch if you haven't been to it before, where we recognize our first responders of the year, from fire, EMS, to volunteer firefighters, to police officers, troopers, game wardens, anybody that wears a badge or a uniform that's out there for us. Dave Samuel, can you come up here real quick, please, sir? Please. Promise, it's not going to hurt that much. So Dave does, as everybody knows, a lot every year about ringing the bell, going to Gibson's, getting out there, staying in the snow, staying in the ice. He doesn't care. He wants you out there. So we got something from the Croc Center from the Salvation Army for the club, but I figured there's probably nobody else better at this club that deserves to have this on your wall. If you apply for the bell
Excellent.
ring.
Well, thank you, sir. Oh, yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you all for ringing.
It's very much a combined effort on every Rotarian, but Dave goes above and beyond to organize that. So thank you, sir. Colonel Rittenhouse, you have something to say about Josh the Otter?
Yes, those of you who are interested in supporting Josh the Otter, I'd like to have a very quick little meeting back here. I do have a few books I'd like to start to study up for it and everything. Just a few minutes right after this.
Thank you, sir. Are you going to allow Zoom people to be in your meeting if they're there or want to be?
No, I think I'm going to terminate the Zoom.
Okay, so there will be a meeting after for Josh the Otter. So if anybody's on Zoom that would like to participate, please reach out to Dave Rittenhouse for that. Marta, I'm going to let you come up and speak just a little bit on a project that Christy Vandenberg talked to us about before the meeting. Since you wrote it down and you got the list in front of you.
Just gonna have to wing this.
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting to be up here. You know, at one of the last meetings, a lot of you were interested in what Rotary is doing for Ukraine and how we might be able to help. And so I put an email together and sent you guys some links. But Christy also has pulled some information. And if you go to the Rotary International website, right on that front page, they've got a disaster response fund, and those funds are going to Ukraine. And there's some clubs in the district that are sending district funds. We would like to ask for any individual here that is interested in doing that. Please let Christy know that you want to do that and tell her what you're going to do. She wants to try to match the contributions from this club to go to Ukraine. And so I think, you know, we all watch kind of what's happening over there. And as we ask ourselves, what are some of the things that we might be able to do about it? This is another one of those areas where Rotary International extends our reach far beyond our community and our own borders. And so if you can make a contribution through that website, let Christy know what you've done and how much, and then she's going to see what she can do relative from a district standpoint to help get some additional funds sent over. Okay.
4 minutes and 32 seconds, so I'll be brief. Paula? Our weekly greeting to you. How are you? Good. David, where are you, David? Do you have two guests? Okay, yes, Mark's with you, I believe, right?
Yeah, this is Mark Williams, who's my guest. He is a Navy vet and a student at Shore University. He is also like parents who did it for real. So he's right now. He's summer exchange.
All right. Good. Welcome. Well, yeah, where are we with that? Bill, keep on.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Washington, and David and I met Gabriel this past December. Gabriel's been here about 2 years. We came forward, so Terry expressed interest.
Great. Welcome, welcome. got me on that one. I won't say anything. Mr. Miller, glad you're here today. How you feeling? He had some major repairs, and I don't think I'm embarrassing him. I'm serious about this. I'm glad to see you up and moving better. So, okay.
All right. Woody, you had one thing that you wanted to come up and talk about as a project that you're part of. As y'all know, Woody came from the Houston area. He's still very involved with the Houston livestock and the junior livestock show. And he has a little scholarship information to pass on. So Roy, I told him to get with you after the meeting.
Hi, everybody. Something I found is consistent in Texas in general and Rotary everywhere is everybody's always trying to do things to help other people, especially kids. So one of the things that's really helped out with the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, they've been around for 90 years. I've been a volunteer out there for 20 years, my wife for 18, 17. And every dollar they bring in, they don't have to spend goes into some kid's scholarship fund. And this year they had 2,300 college applications for a main scholarship. And the rodeo scholarship in the last few years is $20,000 a year, 4 years. So it's a big deal. So like a lot of people in Rotary, one of the things that my wife and I get involved in is a community service related to kids. We're out as a volunteer doing field operations for the barbecue cook-off for the rodeo, but we're also on the scholarship judging team. So that's been the first wave of that activity completed this week. So those scholarships go to anywhere for kids to study anything. Rodeo ties into a lot of military and vets and other things in this region. And I know at least one kid in the Kerrville area that was the recipient of that scholarship a couple of years ago. So this is very much cycles back into our area. So it's something we do. We Kerrville Rotary, lots and lots of Rotary people contribute to do these kinds of things, but specifically for this one event to help the kids. So thanks to everybody.
All right. Wine time is fun time. Mary Rower, are you wearing your tag or pin? Well, nobody else was drawn, so I guess I get to take this one up. How about Tim Krinwogi? All right, we only drew 3 names, so I hope this one's it. Clint Morris, are you wearing your Rotary pin today? Well, come on up. And I'll close on a happy note. Stephanie Miller has no families in Rotary this week. So that's always a good thing. But if you know of a friend or family member or Rotarian or somebody needs a prayer, please don't hesitate to say it for them and let us know so we can add it to the prayer list. So with that, I'll invite everybody to stand and join me in the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, fair to all concerned, will build goodwill, better friendships. All, boy, I cannot talk to you.